This is the second part of a three-part series on mythology and Stargate. The first part is on the idea of rational primitive man in Stargate. In this second installment, we're going to talk specifically about the role of Norse mythology in the Stargate franchise. And in the third installment, we'll talk about even more specifically the idea of Ragnarok in Norse mythology in Stargate. So in the first part, we discussed the ways in which the Abydonians, even though they were completely rational and logical in their approach to Ra and the Goa'uld, were unable to really progress beyond the false idea that they were gods, because Ra is always there presenting himself with his great and divine power. Now, the ancient Egyptians were able to shake off Ra's yoke by burying the Stargate, and therefore they were able to progress, so that by the time the Stargate is recovered in the 20th century, mankind has abandoned primitive myth and embraced science. And so the Earthlings of the 20th century never take seriously the idea that Ra and his people are gods. For them, the most surprising element would be that a sister civilization to Egypt exists, and even more surprising, on another planet. So as the SG-1 series progresses, science is never seriously challenged by myth. The Ori, for example, they might have ascended to a higher plane of existence, but despite their supernatural seeming powers and hyper-advanced technology, their claims of godhood are depicted as being false. The Ori's religion is little more than a scam that's foisted on primitive people to keep them from advancing on their own. Ascension, rather than being, strictly speaking, a spiritual movement, is instead an evolutionary movement. When the Asgard aliens are unable to ascend, this is not depicted as a spiritual problem. Indeed, the Asgard are depicted as the most benevolent of all the major races in the series. It's a physical, scientific problem, an unfortunate side effect of their cloning technology. So although many of the races of the series use myth to control primitive people and create religions to systematize that control, the central beliefs are false. Science is always the answer. Science is always where rational man will go in Stargate, unless stifled by a more scientifically advanced rational being. In the Arc of Truth, when Tommen says, you think I'm crazy for believing in the Ori, Vala replies, not crazy, just wrong. Myth, however, goes beyond some sort of cosmic alien hustle in Stargate. Now, Stargate could have simply defanged myth, and the show might merely have been a kind of smug, condescending view of primitive people and their quaint religious beliefs. Instead, however, the show exploits the power of myth for storytelling. Each myth, since it has the support of some alien influence, must by necessity have some element of truth in it. By observing the commonality of myth, what is normally referred to as archetype, Daniel Jackson is able to determine that there exist alien rivals to the Goa'uld. In the same way, the viewer is invited to import the elements from the various myths into the story and characters of Stargate, enriching that world with mythic resonance. So let's examine one particular race, the Asgard, and the ways in which the writers used our understanding of Norse myth to enrich the characters and create dramatic tension over the course of the SG-1 series. Now, in Norse mythology, the term Asgard refers to a place, not to the gods themselves. The gods are called the Aesir, and the capital city they dwell in is called Asgard, which literally means something like the dwelling place of the Aesir or the stronghold of the Aesir. In the Stargate mythos, the gods themselves, or in this case the aliens who masquerade as gods, are called the Asgard. Though we learn of their existence early on, we actually meet the alien Thor in the second season in the episode Thor's Chariot. After having earlier in the second season seen Thor as a holographic image of a tough-looking Viking human, the actual Thor appears to be a Roswell Gray, small, weak, and slow. Asgard's superiority, then, is a product of their technology. The godlike images of themselves that they project are fake, but in another way, they're true. They represent what humans of an earlier era would have understood as powerful. So as the series progresses, it becomes clear that the Asgard have long been the protectors of Earth and other planets against Goa'uld enslavement. In Norse mythology, the Aesir war with another set of gods, the Vanir. Now, the Vanir are not depicted as necessarily evil, but are perhaps better understood as a rival set of gods. The Goa'uld are not associated with the Vanir, but instead with Jotun, which is a race of giants that oppose both the other camps of gods. In the episode Thor's Hammer, we're told that the Asgard oppose the Ettins, which is the anglicized term for the Jotun, although the term might have been more familiar to us from its use in Dungeons & Dragons. Now, we see here in this use of a Dungeons & Dragons term the propensity of the writers to exploit popular mythology rather than ancient classical medieval mythology. And in doing so, they appeal to the mythic understanding of their audience rather than seeking to create a very close connection with the literary tradition. It's here that the dramatic tension begins to build. Rather than having an extremely complex relationship between the Asgard and the other races, Stargate presents the Asgard as undeniable champions of mankind. The Vanir do not even really appear to the audience until after the destruction of Asgard. The Goa'uld are simply Ettins of great knowledge, power, and evil. Part 3, we're going to talk about how they take this very same popular understanding of the Norse tradition and use that dramatic tension with the idea of Ragnarok to create the sense that humanity might be doomed.